All right. Hey everyone, big up to my mime. This is Mark V. Welcome to KafKanada. Today I have the pleasure of speaking to Tim Moen, leader of the Libertarian Party of Canada, politician, shitstirrer, firefighter, EMT, family man, Tim?
I am, yes, yeah. I have 4 kids,
Four
happily
kids.
married.
God bless you for that. Well done.
Yeah.
And we're going to be talking today about how weird Canada is. The question I always ask everybody when we're out and about is if, first of all, if they're Canadian, which I know you are. So I'll skip to the second question, which is, are you a proud Canadian, Tim?
I am a proud Canadian. Canadian as I guess I define it, not necessarily as Trudeau defines it, but I'm a proud Canadian, yeah.
Awesome. What are you most proud of?
Well, I am proud of, you know what, I should take a step back here. I've been going on a tirade lately about pride and talking about how we shouldn't have pride in things that we have no hand in accomplishing. So I am grateful to be a Canadian. I'm grateful to live in Western civilization and to live in a country that provides so much liberty and opportunity for myself and for my family. So that is what I'm grateful for. I'm grateful for the tradition of Enlightenment values that have led to property rights and respect for individual liberty, that have created all the flourishing and created a safe haven for my ancestors, my grandparents to flee from Stalinist Russia and come to Canada and be able to make a living. I mean, they literally lived in a grain bin for the first few years they were here with their 8 kids and grew crops in the ditch. But through hard work and just having a government that was out of their way, that was protecting their liberty, they built up a great life for their children and their grandchildren and great-grandchildren. I'm very grateful for that.
Well, fair enough, and that's a great answer. It's probably one of the better answers I've ever heard. Usually when I ask people what they're proud of, I mean, they always say they're proud. And then when I ask them what they're proud of, I get these blank looks. It's like I just showed a card trick to a dog. You know, it's like
Right.
they've never considered it, and they come up with these, banal answers like maple syrup or diversity. And when I get a bit Socratic on them and try to unpack that, they tend to get a bit annoyed, really, because it kind of just goes to show that there's like a very shallow concept of identity in Canada. Would you agree that that's true?
Yeah, I think that's probably true. Yeah, and I think that there's a limited. One of the reasons I kind of take exception to using the word pride here is that we're standing on the backs of giants. It's not myself that built this country that created all the flourishing, that created the substrate of liberty that we all enjoy and take for granted. It was other people. And I feel like in a sense that when I just say I'm proud to be Canadian, I'm taking responsibility for something I had no hand in. And by doing that, I'm actually using it as an excuse to not take any more responsibility over my own life and building my own character and contributing to this project called Canada. So I think that most people, yeah, they use pride and in a way that they probably mean grateful to some extent, but I think we have to be careful about how we use language. I think our use of language has gotten sloppy over the years. And in a big way, our language kind of creates our own reality and gives us an excuse for not taking any personal responsibility. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it's kind of an armchair thing. Like you're proud of supporting the Maple Leafs or something, as if their accomplishments somehow affect your life or you in some sense contributed to their success. When I say the Maple Leafs, there's not much success going on there, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I absolutely get it. Doug Stanhope has a good bit about this. I remember when we went over there and saved the French's ass, right? Oh, really, Carl? Was that you and me? Did we do that? Because if I recall, last night we were just in the McDonald's drive-thru. In what way did you and I, go over there and save the French's butts from the Nazis?
Yeah, no kidding. And you could flip that on its head and say that the French saved the Americans' asses during the American Revolution.
No, that's a good point too. Yeah.
What you said about standing on the shoulders of giants. I really agree with that. I'm interested in history. Um, just like I think most Canadian students, I was turned off Canadian history because it's just presented in such a boring, bland way. But if you actually dig into it, you realize that the toughness and the ruggedness of the people that built this country into what it is today is just astounding. I mean, just living in the environment that we live in, you can't, just set your hammock up and go collect coconuts when you're hungry. It takes a lot of hard work. We're the ants, not the grasshoppers, or we used to be.
Yeah.
But look where we are now. It seems like that's totally collapsed. I don't know if you saw our first video. We kind of made a bit of fun of that, saying, the beaver is an industrious creature, which in no way exemplifies modern Canada. We thought the pussy might be a better symbol.
That's a good point. Although pussies are pretty tough and resilient, could take a pounding, but yeah, no, you're right. I mean, look, there is this sense that that we've kind of lost our way, right? Like we aren't the industrious people we are. We undermine the very thing that brought us to the dance in a lot of ways, and there's a lot of truth to the idea that hard times create hard men create good times, good men create soft, who create bad times again. And, I worry that we're at that stage, right? We have a soft culture that undermines the very, very principles and that ethic that brought us here, that created this flourishing. I mean, that as economists say, it's not poverty that needs to be explained, it's wealth that needs to be explained. Our natural state is impoverished, in the dirt, in caves, trying to scrounge from before dusk till after dawn, trying to get food and the necessary resources to survive. How then do we explain this amazing flourishing that we have here in Western civilization when you look at a lot of the rest of the world still scrounging in the dirt in kind of its natural state? How did we get here? Well, we got here through respect for individual liberty, from property rights, from division of labor, through capitalism. And all those things are being undermined on a constant basis. And so I do worry about where we might be headed. It'd be nice to try to preserve this and get off that cycle of going from hard to soft and just try to create something sustainable. But I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I've often thought about that. How suffering propels upward mobility. If your situation sucks, you want to improve it. And so a lot of people who came over here impoverished, I mean, I prefer talking to immigrants, frankly. I just find them more real because I know that if you're from the Congo, you've suffered in your life. You've been tested in various ways before you get here. And a lot of them kind of, when they get more comfortable with me, will exhibit a bit of contempt for Canadian society. It's not what they thought it was before they came here. They expected us to be like an advanced, civilized nation, and they just find a lot of people weak. I mean, they've told me directly how weak and degenerate they find us, and how they worry about the effect it's going to have on their kids. That, because as we know, the parents do what they can do, but the effect of the culture at large and your peer group has a very big effect on human development, right? So if everybody is a weak whiner around you, it doesn't matter how tough your granddad was, right? You're going to be more like your pals than you are going to be like grandpa or grandma.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you look at the leader of our country, right? Coming from a trust fund, going to a drama club, and now running around the world like a playboy, showing off his socks.
Right.
It is, it's very symbolic in terms of a metaphor of where our culture has become. And I'm a big proponent of the idea that government emerges from culture. And so I don't blame Trudeau so much as I blame the culture that put him up on that pedestal and has shown us for what we are now, how far we've fallen. And so I think you're right. These people that come here imagining that there's going to be opportunity and they're going to be kind of inculcated in a culture that that is meritocracy, based on meritocracy, where they can get ahead, where it's not about people looking at them patronizingly or like their parents to these poor little souls coming over here and giving them all the handouts and trying to make them dependents on their generosity and feed their egos. I could see how that could be off-putting for someone who can come here. I could just imagine what my great-grandfather would have thought had he come over here and been immediately taken onto the bosom of Mother Canada as if he were a tiny little infant to be looked after. This was a man who hacked a farm out of the Russian wilderness and faced smallpox and gypsies and commies, and he's being treated like a little baby coming over here. Are you kidding me? No, that is just wrong. I mean, that is bigotry of the highest level.
I totally agree. I mean, I'm in the capital, so believe me, it's even worse here than it is everywhere else. I first heard that term from some Alberta lads that I met on the West Coast Trail years ago. What I told them was from Ottawa. I got that look like I lived abroad for a long time. You go to a hostel and there's a bunch of people from around the world and you get an American there. And then they say, oh, I'm an American. And everyone kind of looks at them and as if they're to blame for everything you don't like about America. That's how these Alberta lads kind of treated me. I was nonplussed, frankly, because I agreed with them. I'm like, I totally agree. Right. And then years later, I was in Nova Scotia at a music festival, and a hippie, when I told him I was from Ottawa, said, oh, you're from the capital, eh? And I thought, I love that. I'm using that from now on.
Yeah, well, I've often made the comment that, if I ever get elected, I'll have to bring my hazmat suit to get away from that place unscathed. But
well, you've been here, right?
I have, for sure, yeah.
What were your impressions when you were here?
Well, it's a beautiful city.
The natural beauty of it is astounding. That's true.
It is, yeah. And I met a lot of great people while I was there. There is a particular air of, how would I think arrogance might be too strong a word, but there's definitely a sense that, if you're from outside that place, that you're looked down on a little bit, as if, I think there's a sense that we know what's best for you, that we know what's going on. We're the center of Canada, and you're adorable, kind of thing, right?
Right. Meanwhile, the place is falling apart.
Right.
I like to make the distinction between Ottawa natives, which are called Ottawans, and the kind of people you were talking about, the smug, arrogant ones, which I call Ottawankers. They've never been anywhere. They've never done anything. And yet they're going to tell you how to live your life. It's just insane. I think a big problem we also have is, unlike certain other places, the path to upward mobility, and particularly here, is to work for the government. It's kind of funny when someone criticizes climate change, say, and immediately go, well, he's funded by the fossil fuels industry or this or that. But then the people who are pushing it, who are they funded by? Nobody ever talks about that. I have some people that I know who work bringing refugees into Canada. Like, that's how they get paid. And so, of course, they're all for that. They're one of these, like, no one is illegal, no borders. Well, There's self-interest there that is never kind of discussed. It's always discussed when someone might have a private sector interest. But the fact that you're getting, you can't get fired from your government job or your NGO job funded by the government, and you're pushing these agendas, nobody ever kind of calls them out on that.
Yeah, and of course, the assumption here is that if you work in the public sector, that you suspend your self-interest, right? Which is the furthest thing from the truth. And so, instead of your self-interest being tied to serving customers and having your livelihood staked on that, of course, it's tied to pulling the wool over people's eyes, to creating make-work projects, to pleasing the masters above you, right? It's not about serving customers. You have your job regardless. In fact, your customer kind of gets in the way of you doing your job. Like they're annoying, and you need to get them out of there. Yeah,
indeed.
And you can see that. You can see that attitude. Any public sector place, it tends to pervade.
Yeah, no doubt. And no matter how badly you do your job, you're likely to get a promotion. We have all of these failures who I don't understand why Bob Ray is not emperor of the world, if you know who that guy is. he's a provincial hack. He's been in national politics. He's flipped from the NDP to the Liberal Party to the, God knows who he's aligned himself with now. I mean, who are these people? They get defined as statesmen. He's a loser. Okay, why are we inflicted with these losers? The mayor of Ottawa, Jim Twatson, as I call him, Jimmy Watson. I mean, this guy's been in government for 30 years-ish. He's accomplished nothing. He goes around shaking everybody's hand and going to bake sales. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, he's an iron-fisted dictator who tells council what to do. I mean, he's in the pocket of developers. I mean, it's a joke. And yet this guy keeps getting reelected, and they put out these bullshit polls. Like, he's one of the most popular mayors in Canada. And I think, Jesus wept. I mean, can't we possibly get someone who can actually accomplish something? But we never do.
Well, I think that accomplishing things and getting elected are two very different skill sets. You know, it used to be that politics was seen as a burden. Like you would go be your community's representative very grudgingly because it was going to cost you your business for all the years you were gone. You weren't going to be able to make a living properly. But now it's become a career, and it's the career part is staying elected by paying off special interests, by being a smooth talker, by telling people the things they want to hear, by being a snake oil salesman and a conman. Those are the skills that are necessary. And so unless you are on that stage telling people what they want to hear, selling them a product and saying the things that are going to get them to vote for you, you're not going to get elected. You're not going to be in the game. And so that makes it difficult because in a sense you have to corrupt the system in order to even get elected. And that, you know, this is what kept me out of politics for so long, is because I saw this a long time ago. In fact, 6 months before I was running for Prime Minister of Canada, I wrote an article explaining why you should probably never vote or get involved in political action and how it might even be borderline immoral. What changed my mind was that I realized I was leaving an opportunity on the table. There was an audience there and there was a stage, and if getting ideas is out to the culture so that government can change is important to me, standing on that stage and taking opportunities to deliver that message was my duty, and I was shoving it aside for some kind of purity reasons, I guess. But that I realized, you know, ultimately you got to take all the opportunities that come your way to get the message out, because government emerges from culture and not the other way around.
I agree. I ran for city council here in Ottawa in 2014 just to see what the process would be like from the inside. Whose ass you're supposed to kiss, who's kissing your ass, just what the process involved. And I got a lot of love. I came in last. Of course, it doesn't matter if you don't come in first. But a lot of people gave me love about, because I keep it straight, I keep it real, but which nobody wanted to hear in the political class, the usual like chattering classes, right? They despised me, right. Which I consider a badge of honor. But real people, they really liked what I was doing. They found it refreshing. It's kind of, whether you love him or hate him, you got to love Trump in the sense that he is this outside guy who, as you were saying, I mean, the guy's a multi-billionaire. Certainly he's not going to improve his lifestyle by becoming the president. For him, it's actually a sacrifice to become the president. Whereas, you know, Twinkle Toes, our guy, George Bush Redux, he's always been considered the golden boy, like it was always going to happen. I mean, he doesn't even make the most basic attempts to cultivate leadership skills. I mean, even the inbreds, the royals, they send their kids to military academies, so at least they have a modicum of understanding of how to lead. Whereas our dipshit goes to drama school and bounces around the world as a playboy, as you were saying. Now he's got quite a career as a sock model, and I would argue also a sock puppet. Which kind of brings me to the next question, is that guy can't possibly be running the show here. I mean, he doesn't know his ass from page 7. So I don't want to start talking about the Illuminati or whatever, but I think everyone who understands politics understands there's a power elite, local power elites and global power elites. and they have a lot of influence on the national process. I lived in South Korea for many years, and I was so inspired to see those people. I was there in that transition between coming out of a dictatorship into the free pluralistic society they are now. And people stood up, and it's a very, very free place. But, I lost my train of thought there.
You were talking about the real power players.
Indeed. What was interesting is Soros collapsed the economy in 97, and the IMF came in and forced all kinds of structural changes in the Korean economy, and opened their markets and this and that. And then in subsequent elections, everyone was talking about like what foreign investors would think. Like that was the thing about whether the leader of the country would be effective, whether the foreign investors would sign off on him, which I found bizarre. We don't do it so explicitly here in Canada, but in your opinion, what are the forces that are really influencing Canadian society? Because it's certainly not, the political class, at least the ones that we see.
Right. Well, for sure. I mean, I've always said that politicians are largely, there's a number of constraints on them. They're not as free or in charge as people imagine, right? They're constrained by the Overton window. They're constrained by culture to kind of a narrowly defined kind of set of parameters where they can make their decisions in. And this is why you don't see a huge difference between the policies of the Conservatives or the Liberals or the NDP. They're all fairly similar. I mean, you would have to, and this is why they fixate on the most minute details to try to distinguish themselves from each other. But of course, there are people around the Prime Minister and around the decision makers that are exerting an influence, and there are people that are opportunists, right? And so, just to give you an example, Justin Trudeau's ex CFO from his campaign was or is a co-founder of Tweed Cannabis company, right, and a major shareholder. Indeed. And of course, we see cannabis legalization playing out a particular way, right? It's going to benefit people like that are politically connected, and of course, so they're constantly in the Prime Minister's ear and in the caucus's ear, talking about how this is the most responsible way for the kids, blah, blah, blah. And so you can see their influence. And so I think that what we're seeing here is a system that is, it's an emergent property of a system of beliefs from a culture, right? This is what you would expect to see when you have a culture that believes in unrestrained democracy. In other words, that whatever the mob's opinion is moral and just. It's what you would expect to see in a culture that has been indoctrinated from K to 12 in a government school. It's what you would expect to see in a culture that has taken for granted the fruits of their ancestors' labor and is taking it easy. I mean, these are the things that you would expect to see. So I don't think you necessarily need to think that there's a conspiracy, although of course there are. I mean, there are all sorts of people conspiring to figure out how they can use government and their connections in Ottawa and all over the place to better themselves. But the scary fact is, I don't think anyone's in control. That's part of the problem. We have relinquished control over our own lives to government, and this is the reality. And so, I'm a big believer in decentralizing government as much as possible, getting control closer to the individual, because right now it's chaos, and the people that are in the places to take advantage of opportunities, God bless them, they're taking advantage. The rest of us are going to suffer because of that.
You brought up cannabis. Just want to say I love reefer. And you brought up decentralization, and the way the whole thing is playing out fits into this whole KafKanadian shtick that we're doing about just how bizarre and weird our society is. I've always felt that the reason why they criminalized cannabis and demonized it is not because it's bad, but because it's actually very decentralizing. It's such a valuable commodity, like it has an intrinsic value. If we are really a green country, as we like to think we are, we should be going full out on a cannabis economy. I mean, people complain about plastic bags gunking up the ocean, and I think any sane person would agree that's bad. Well, why not make them out of biodegradable cellulose from hemp? I mean, let's build some factories and do that. Let's produce textiles. I mean, it has thousands of industrial uses. I just think they don't like the fact that you could grow it and it's so useful and it puts the power back into your hands. Instead, they stick to these like ridiculous tropes like, think of the children. Meanwhile, my kid in grade 9, when she went to high school, could score weed like that.
Yeah,
she didn't.
Yeah,
she's a nerd, God bless her. But I'm just saying,
Yeah.
it's no barrier. If they're worried about the children, well, the situation couldn't be worse from that point of view right now. So,
Well, absolutely, and there's so much hypocrisy and mythology around all drugs, right? I mean, crystal meth, you're going to get hooked on the first time you try it, right? But yet we're going to prescribe it to kids in the form of Adderall to help them focus in school. It's the exact same molecule we're talking about here. So which is it? Is it a medicine to help kids focus, or is it the most addictive evil drug mankind has ever produced? Fentanyl is another example. Like, I administer fentanyl regularly on the job as a paramedic. I've been doing it for 20 years. And now in the last 6 months, patients I give it to who are in a crisis, who genuinely need it, are worried that I'm going to kill them with it, or they're going to get addicted after I administer a dose. And so we see all this drug mythology, right? But, I was on a podcast once with the Prince of Pot, Mark Emery, and his thesis about why cannabis and most drugs are illegal is because women got the vote, and because they didn't want men to have any fun. They wanted them to not stay out late at bawdy houses and places of ill repute and come home to their family. And so as soon as they got the vote, they started outlawing a lot of these substances to kill our fun.
Well, if you look into the history of it, cannabis in particular is very mysterious. Nobody knows how it was criminalized. It was just kind of added to pre-existing legislation by people like Emily Murphy, who was a virulent anti-Chinese racist, and she didn't like opium, right? So there was a bunch of legislation passed, and then they just tacked it on. But there was no debate, there's no record of how that happened. We criminalized cannabis in 1923, way before the Americans ever did. And again, it was on moral grounds, right? Like, it's promoting moral turpitude amongst the youth, and brown people are selling it and having fun with it, so let's get rid of it. It is quite obvious if you look into these progressives. Like, we have on Parliament Hill, we've got a statue of the famous five. At least 3 of them hated natives, hated Chinese, were virulent eugenicists. They promoted these sterilization programs that were administered by the provincial governments, right? So
Tommy Douglas's master's thesis was called The Problem of the Subnormal Family. And he talked about all the ways that government could stop idiots from reproducing.
No doubt. And then he founds our medical system. What a little coinkydink that is. And not to be too conspiratorial, but he did his thesis at Rockefeller University. It's not called that anymore, but that's what it was called in those days. So there's this dark side to people who are advocating for progressivism. I mean, on the face of it, I think we would all agree we want people to be equal and have the same opportunities, no matter what your creed, gender, what have you is. But they kind of weaponize that and turn it into a form of social control. And we can really see that manifesting today. That craziness that just went on at Wilfrid Laurier with that TA, I'm sure you followed that story.
Yeah.
I mean, can it get any weirder? You couldn't make it up, really. I mean, Jordan Peterson's going, this is what's going to happen. And, all the Globe and Mail pundits and the chattering class are like, oh, well, he's just a dinosaur relic. He doesn't know. Well, look, it's exactly what happened. Exactly what he said was going to happen happened. Where's the end of it? That's what I'm wondering.
Well, yeah, that's a good question. I don't know that that there will be. I kind of see, there being certain forces that are always in conflict. The goal is to try to harmonize as much as possible. But of course, right now, things are becoming progressively divisive, right? And I think the primary kind of motivating psychological factor behind progressivism is a sort of elitism, right? You look at yourself in the mirror and you think that, at least unconsciously, you think that you're better than everyone else, right? And that you're going to be the savior of the world, and you're going to help everyone out, and you're so empathetic, and so it places you. And it feeds your ego. It places you high and everyone else kind of low. And so you're either an enemy to them, in which case you're a lowly Republican or conservative, an idiot, backwoods, redneck, or you're one of the people that you can actually help, right? That you can feel like a parent over, name your minority group, name your oppressed category, and they're like little children to you. And I think it's a ridiculous mindset to have. But I think typically the forces that are kind of at work emerge from family, right? So I've always thought of politics as of left and right as essentially people that want mom in charge versus people that want dad in charge. And the left tend to, if you look at things that traditional moms care about in a family, like in a nuclear traditional family, moms care about making sure the least of these are looked after. They want to nurture everyone. They want to try to encourage sharing among everyone in the family. They're concerned about the environment. They're caretakers of the family environment, and those typically map over leftist concerns, right? When you take the progressive ideology out of it and that mindset out of it, that's kind of people that are attracted to the left typically come from that frame of mind. People that are attracted to the right care about traditional dad things, right? They have their head on a swivel. They're looking for external threats. They enforce boundaries. That's where your mom starts and you stop, mister. They're focused on gathering resources for the family, right? And so these kind of map over the conservative focuses of concerned about external threats, foreign invaders, concerned about the economy, and concerned about borders and property rights and that sort of thing. Now, normally, when you're on a substrate of liberty, these two types of worldviews mesh very well together. You need them. This is how we survived as a civilization. Dad creates a protective bubble, gathers resources, while mom does all the things within that help the family and life flourish within it. And when you have a substrate of liberty, that works. But when you start creating a bigger and bigger government, when you ask government to do more and more and essentially become a surrogate spouse, you create a gun in the room, and that gun, you're either holding that gun, pointing it at someone, or someone else is holding that gun and pointing it at you. And so I don't think it's any mistake that right now we see increasing divisiveness of the left and the right. At the same time, we see third wave feminists versus men's rights activists. At the same time, we see record divorce rates and men and women at each other's throats in divorce. To me, it's all part of the same kind of fractal that's going through society at all levels of magnification. And the challenge is to try to reverse that and get us back to a substrate of liberty where we rely on each other to survive and flourish, rather than look at each other as enemies that threaten our survival.
Yeah, I get it. Getting back to getting back to what we were talking about with Canadian identity and touching on Canadian values, I think Canadian values always were help your neighbor out, but mind your own business. If they need a helping hand, help them out, but you don't stick your nose in other people's business. And so you had that balance between nurturing by, coming together as a community to help people out, and, the more sort of masculine qualities of, upward mobility and hard work and creating something, business and tilling the fields and all that. I mean, there's a partnership there that has been disconnected because of the intervention of the state. So when you
Absolutely.
had a small town, sure, the government was there, but because of the the sort of far-flung nature of Canada, they didn't really mess with you that much. It was only post-World War II where they really started to encroach into, what we would consider, people's personal liberty. Whereas now they feel everything is their jurisdiction. to tell you what to do.
Yeah.
It's just bizarre. I mean, and their social engineering has really paid off in the sense that people go along with it. They participate in their own degradation and they almost beg for it.
They do, yeah.
Did you hear that crazy poll where Canadians, of course, polls in and of themselves, it's a flawed methodology now, based on like 1,200 respondents. They said that they want guns banned from all urban areas. It's just ridiculous. Right. These people never held
like Chicago. Make it like Chicago.
Exactly. We have shootings going on a weekly basis here in the capital. Nothing can be done. I mean, the cops aren't taking care of it. These aren't lawful gun owners gone awry. These are criminals, right? So add as many laws as you want. It's not going to solve the problem.
No, that's right. And it underlines this kind of infantile mentality we have that government is magic, right? Remember when we were infants or toddlers, we looked up at our parents and everything they did was amazing and magic. Right. And it's like they can make stuff appear and disappear in front of our eyes, and they were like gods to us. Well, this is how most people view government. And so, of course, if you want guns, if you're worried about gun violence, you say, oh yes, government, do something about it, because you imagine that they can actually do something about it. Yeah, it's to me another symptom of how far we've fallen as a culture.
Have you been to Texas, Tim?
No, I haven't been to Texas.
I've been a few times, and I got to say, nicest people you'll ever meet. Very polite, not passive aggressive like we are up here, because there's consequences to being an asshole. Like everybody's packing heat. So it's that old cliche, a well-armed society is a polite society. People look you in the eye. People walk around with confidence. Whereas here, you get people who just take the piss, because what are you going to do? There's no consequences to being an arsehole here. And you've been told your whole life that your opinion matters. Nobody's ever put you in your place. They've never even been in a fist fight. So it's kind of funny when you see these, certain groups advocating on both sides, the right and the left, the neckbeards, as my young producer calls them, on the left and on the right, talking about, they're agitating for violence. They've never been in a fist fight. Like, they don't understand what violence is. I've been in a lot of fist fights, and I am terrified of them, because I know what could happen, but on the other hand, I know what it's about. So if that's how it's got to go, then let's dance. Do you see what I'm saying?
Right.
But it's like a Dungeons and Dragons game gone wrong. It's all these people are defining themselves and what they are about and what they can do based on nothing. They've never been tested.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, it's to me another kind of symptom or byproduct of a weak culture, right? We've become atomized. We're on our phones, cut off from each other. We've never actually had to maybe go toe to toe with someone who we're disrespecting. Like the way some people talk to each other on social media, they would never do face to face if they had any sense, because they know that there would be some consequences to it. Again, I think you're right. I think that kind of face to face interaction where there is a sense that violence could erupt, and so I better avoid triggering it occur. There was it reminds me of this. I don't know if you watched Jordan Peterson at all, but he did this video with Camille Paglia recently.
Oh, that was great.
There was a section in there where he talked about how there's nothing that a man can do about a crazy woman, because when we're talking one-on-one with another man, there's always a sense that things could come to fisticuffs if worse comes to worse, and we'll be enmeshed in violence. But there's no ethic that says I can punch a woman if this conversation goes off the rails, or she can punch me all she wants. And so, I have to basically, there's nothing a man can do about a woman who's crazy, because there's a prohibition there on escalating things past a certain point. And I think that's generally true. I mean, on my job as a paramedic, I've been assaulted far more times by females than males. Males understand that if they cross a line, there's going to be consequences. A lot of females simply don't have that sense. They can just cross that line with impunity and go ahead and grab me places and slap me and do things. And there's not going to be the same kind of consequences as there is when there's a man trying to do those things to me. And so I do get your point where an armed society tends to be a polite society, because we can see it in male-to-male interactions, face-to-face. But social media kind of takes that element out of it, unfortunately.
Yeah, in my perfect world, not only would we have guns, we'd all be carrying swords, and dueling would still be a thing. And boy,
well, that's the one thing that Justin Trudeau did right. I mean, he repealed the part of the criminal code that outlawed dueling and pretending to be a witch as well. So
indeed.
Kudos to him. We can pretend to be witches and we can duel now. But
yeah, I grudgingly have to give that one to him. You can do things right by accident every now and then, I suppose. So, Tim, we're getting close to the end here. Can you tell me what's the plan for the Libertarian Party? I mean, these ideas are catching fire. The establishment media that's, supporting this moribund system that we have is collapsing. Nobody listens to them anymore. Post media is going down the toilet. They've just closed in Ontario, just where I'm living, like 6 community newspapers. Metro's gone. And so I think that's a great thing, in the sense that it's the alternative media, if you want to call it that, is going to pick up that slack. If you look down in the States, whether you love him or hate him, guys like Alex Jones have propelled people like Ron Paul, gave him a huge platform, and really spread these liberty ideas. And in Canada, there's people trying. I know you've talked to several people like John Sigurdsson and Dan Dixon, those guys. God bless them, they're doing the right thing, but they're not getting the kind of traction that you see certain people getting in the States, like Tom Woods, for example, has got a huge following. We have Stefan Molyneux. He's has a lot of people who pay attention to him, and that's great. But what do you see happening in the future for the libertarian movement?
Right. Well, I think it's going to grow. I think there are some dangers ahead. I see a lot of libertarians peeling off into kind of dangerous territory in the alt-right and even white nationalism. That scares me a little bit. It makes me think that maybe we need to be a bit more rigorous and intellectual in terms of helping people really understand libertarianism, because it's like the argument for slavery. Once you get that slavery is immoral, you kind of don't go back to advocating for how to run the plantation better anymore. And so I feel like we maybe need to do a better job there, but definitely people want something different. And so our plan over the next 2 years going into the next general election is to recruit as many candidates as possible. And our hope is, in the past election we had, I think, something like 73 or 74 candidates. We probably would have had closer to 150 candidates, but we had the back end of our party fall apart because of the Lauren Southern fiasco, where I suspended Lauren and then brought her back. And then a few of my executive quit and a bunch of valuable information left with it. So we could have had we had a record year that year. That was the best year in our party history, but it could have been double that. And so I'm looking at what could have been, and I'm saying we can be even better than that 150 number. We're going to be well over 200, I predict, and that's going to give us enough ammunition to be able to say, get me on the national debate stage. Elizabeth May was able to get on the national debate stage when her party didn't have a seat in Ottawa, and she was able to make the case because of the number of candidates she fielded. So I'm hoping we can field, better than a 2/3 slate, or as close to a full slate as possible, be able to make the case to get on that national debate stage. If we get on the national debate stage, then it's a game changer for liberty. We can actually get these ideas out, popularize it, create a movement. And no one needs to win the election to create a movement. If you don't understand what Ron Paul did, even though he didn't win the presidency, he created a movement and that's holding the torch of liberty alive. And we have a lot of gratitude to the work he's done. We can do the same thing here in Canada, I believe. And so if any of your listeners have any interest in getting involved, just getting their name on the ballot, it actually became a lot easier. There was a court case here in Alberta. Up until a month ago, you had to put down $1,000 refundable deposit. And that was that was a bit too much for a lot of candidates. A lot of potential candidates wouldn't even sign their name to that because, going without that $1,000 for a month and a half or 2 months was just too much for them, too uncomfortable for them to bear. And now we don't have to do that anymore. We just need to get 100 signatures or 50 signatures if you're in certain ridings, and file your paperwork, and you can be a candidate. And the more candidates we have, even if you are just a paper candidate, just get your name on that ballot. That helps us build a case to get to win back Western civilization, really. So it's not that hard. You can contribute. You can get the word out. You can run as a candidate. And we encourage you to go to libertarian.ca, check out our party, and if you care about these ideas getting out, give us a look, because I think the only way we're going to win back Western civilization is getting these ideas out and shifting culture. It's not going to be winning elections. And so, unfortunately, I don't think the Conservatives are going to do it for us. Even if they win an election, they're essentially Democrats if you look at them from the perspective of the U.S.
They're just
so far
the other side of the same coin, really, aren't they?
Yeah, and they have to be to win an election. To win elections, you have to reflect back culture, and culture in Canada right now is shitty. And we need it to be better, and that means challenging it and saying unpopular things right now. And we need to be willing to sacrifice the elections and sacrifice the vote to win back culture.
I hear you, and I think there has to be a fundamental shift away from this idea of peace, order, and good government, which are supposed to be the guiding principles of our society. They are demonstrably collapsed. I mean, we don't have any of those things. So let's go for liberty and build it up from there. When you free people, look at North Korea and South Korea, right? You couldn't ask for a better example of what happens when you actually let people be free. Then you get incredible wealth, and people strive to be as good as they can be. Meanwhile, here you get graduates who just want to join the government. Like, that's their goal. Not because they even want to do anything in particular. They just want to have a job they can't be fired from and have that security. So we need to be a bit less comfortable than we are. I think that's going to, as society collapses, that's going to happen naturally, which will lead to the renaissance that you're leading, Tim. So God bless you for that. It's been really great talking to you. And can people follow you on Twitter, or how do you get the message out?
Yeah, so libertarian.ca. Twitter is @Moen_Tim, and look me up on Facebook. My personal account is Tim Moen, or my Parliament account, Tim Moen for Parliament. And definitely follow me, friend request me, and let's be a band of brothers.
All right, Tim. Thanks very much. Take care. All the best.
Thanks. You
Bye-bye.
too. Thanks again.